Ladies and gentlemen, the obvious thing, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. I'll start, of course, by welcoming you all here to this, the 8th AGM of the Friends of Sunrising. Last year's AGM online was entertaining, a bit surreal, but it's nice, really good to have some faces back in the room. So thank you all for making the effort to be here today, for returning to this semblance of normality. My name is Bruce. Many of you have seen me up here before, so I apologise that you know what to expect from me. The screen, of course, is our focal point, and I'll do my customary thing of assuring you that all the photographs you see up here today were taken at Sunrising, principally by Emma and David, unless otherwise credited. So, along with your emailed invitations, slide please, David. You should, slide again please, David, sorry, have received the agenda for today. As you can see, there are 7 principal items that we're going to be covering today. There'll also, I think, Emma, be a little additional item in the middle about the nature reserve.
As part of next steps.
Okay. If you've attended previous AGMs, you'll be wearily familiar with my practice of just reading out what you're seeing on screen. Today probably won't be any exception. I will try not to read it out to you. It's quite apparent, and it says it better than I can. So in a moment, we'll talk about the aims and objectives. You'll have a chance to refresh your memories as to the identities of the trustees. We'll work through the various items. I will reappear later to talk about the projects, and I will appear at the end to do the wrapping up and the date of the next AGM. So, slide please, David. Aims and objectives. A reminder, if one were needed, of what the Friends actually is, its role, its purpose, how it exists and functions in tandem with the burial ground. David? As stated in our Constitution, what you see here, is anybody who cannot read that? Do you want me to read it out? No, please no. What you see here, it sums it up. As the charitable arm of Sunrising, that is why the Friends exists. Simply put, it was created to help maintain, to fund and care for both the burial ground and for the nature reserve that exists within it. At this point in time, the burial ground is still very much self-funding, but of course this is a finite source of income, so the Friends was geared to raise funds and work in parallel with the company. Slide, David. So, in practice, this is how the money is raised and what it is there to do. The final part, the community. By community, we of course mean people like yourselves, for whom Sunrising is that uniquely special place. Folk like you who simply see and understand the value of Sunrising and the comfort it offers. A quick reminder of the current trustees, please, David. You can see them all there. Myself, top right, trying to look rustic rather than shattered. Below that, David, very time team. He is our membership secretary. It's David from whom you'll hear about, say, your subscriptions. Emma, of course, you all know, of whom an unflattering photograph doesn't actually exist. Jane Townsend recently took on the responsibility of secretary, as distinct from David's role as membership secretary. Hers is very much the managing the governance and policies of the charity. Bilou, our most recently appointed trustee, you may not yet have met her, but she is here today. Elizabeth, our non-executive trustee, you all may not have seen her at events, you may, but you'll almost certainly have seen or heard her playing her harp and various other instruments as soundtracks to the filmed events. She hates anyone to see her ears, as you can see. And finally, Lizzie Bean has taken on the newly created role of Charity Liaison Officer. So she's very much our eye on the whole sphere of charity and fundraising. So these, ladies and gentlemen, are the trustees. My customary informal invitation at this point If anybody's out there today who might feel that they have particular skills that they would be of use to the Friends and could be brought to the table, do feel free to speak to one of us during the break. I am now going to hand over to Emma, who's going to talk about the third item on the agenda, the fund.
Hi, let's start with membership. I love that picture. That's one, some of you might know, that's one of the roses around the roundhouse, David Austin Rose. We now at Sunrising, just this last week, we tipped 1,300 individuals laid to rest at the natural burial ground. It feels like just a huge responsibility for us, a huge achievement in many ways, because every one laid to rest adds to the established feel of the place, to the community of Sunrising. And although in the winter time, when we've cut back the seasonal growth or the grass, you can see some of the graves, the newer graves and all the little plaques in the woodland. In the summer at this time where this photo was taken, you'll never know that there are that many people laid to rest there. It's just a beautiful wild space. In terms of the membership, given that we've got 1,300 people laid to rest, you can see that figure on the top right, 301 subscribing friends. That's a pretty good percentage for any charity. The green line on the bottom, the baseline, is that steady base of new friends coming in. The blue one is the really positive number, and that's the ones who are resubscribing. And then the yellow at the top is people whose subs might have expired by mistake, or they didn't know it, or they forgot, and they've come back, or they've come back in because of some project that we've been doing. So putting that all together, we've got a really good trend of more friends, people subscribing, and also people resubscribing. The fund itself, and as Bruce said, the fund is a really important part of what we're doing, so that we've got that base of money, that big capital amount that can look after the burial ground in the long run. And a lovely picture there of field maple buds. You never expect the field maple to have so much colour, but that's the spring buds. The fund total. When we began our first AGM 8 years ago here, I think I was very proud to say we had about £12,000 in the bank. We've now just got up to 143,000, which is brilliant. That is currently in an ethical bond, an ethical deposit account, and a current account with an ethical bank. However, with 143,000, we're now looking at taking the first risks in terms of investment. And the only way that we can counter inflation in this day and age, when there's no interest at the bank, as you all know, many of you retired folk know that your capital is going down in value because there's no interest anywhere. We do need to start looking at an ethical investor. So we're talking to a company in Cheltenham who only focus on ethical investments, and we're looking at the next kind of investment, putting some money in so that we can beat inflation. Otherwise, the fund is just going down every year, even if we're putting money in. So next year, how about we target 180,000? What do you think? Maybe that's a bit much, but let's go for it, 180,000. So here you can see the different levels of where that money comes in from. Commission, the blue one at the bottom, is the foundation. Now that's the 10% of every grave plot sold is that blue line. So that's where we are in terms of commission. Then you've got the chunk of green, and that's the fundraising. That's subscriptions, what you pay for in terms of annual subscription, including donations that you give, or if you top up your subscription with more. It's fundraising at events, it's the sales of products, honey and jam and all these wonderful things we've got, which you'll see in the other room, and all your wonderful generosity and support. And then on top of that, you've got the yellow one, which is a little bit trickier. That one is gift aid. So if you are paying tax, please do gift aid, because it does bring us back quite a lot from the HMRC. And then there's interest that comes in from deposit accounts. Thank you. If anyone has any advice about what we might do with money, if you have found an ethical investment, idea that is doing brilliantly for you in your pension years or before, then please do share it. We do, needless to say, do everything we can to make sure that we are acting ethically in terms of being a fundraising body. But recently we have started to subscribe to the fundraising regulator. And in time, although we don't know if we have yet, we're going to have the fundraising regulator logo on our bits and pieces. And that just gives people a little bit of peace of mind that we know what we're doing and that we have someone who's looking over our back to check. We've also, our income has reached a point where we need to be audited each year as a charity commission, registered charity. So we've got a local accountant doing that as well. So we're really moving into a solid sort of situation here. Buying or reserving plots in advance, this is what some of you may have known from the mailing list, changing our policy on this. From the beginning up until May this year, we were selling licences in advance, so you could buy a plot in advance. You can't anymore. People say, oh, why not? Why not? We need to be able to. Actually, that's because it was really useful for us to sell plots in advance in the beginning. It gave us a little bit more money. That money has now been spent or is being spent on infrastructure. Once all the infrastructure is in at Sunrising, we don't need that money coming in advance. What we want is money to be coming in gently over the years to give the burial ground and nature reserve more stability, more security. So we will have a reservation policy in place. And I know some of you have got unpaid reservations, and we'll be talking to you about those in the next couple of months. If you've got a licence, of course, there's no problem with that, it's still in place. But if you're wanting to buy a plot now, you'll have to talk to me about it because we're doing it in a different way. Legacies, this is just my prod to you. Hope that everyone has a will in place. It's so complicated if you don't, not for us, but for the rest of your family. A lot does slip away to the government if you haven't worked it all out yourselves. But also, legacies. It's a really important and a wonderful way that you can support Sunrising. If you've laid someone to rest with us, if you're going to be laid to rest with us yourselves, or even if you're just valuing the nature reserve and the project we're doing, then putting a little bit in your will aside for us when you die would be brilliant. I hate saying it, but please do. It's wonderful. And we've got leaflets. That lasting gift leaflet is on our information stall in the committee room. Thank you. Okay. I'm now going to hand over to David for the next bit, which is about events.
Very good afternoon to you. Events, it seems like a very long time since we've had actually an event like this where we can look in your eyes and see you face to face. Emma mentioned that actually the last time we had a full-blown event was in here. It was the quiz night. I think it must have been February 20... It says it on the next slide. Oh. February 2020 was the last time we were sat in the village hall. And of course, we thought we would repeat it because it was so successful. But because of lockdown and COVID, we had instead an online quiz night, which was hosted by Lizzie and Simon. I don't know, did anybody here attend that? Yeah? I don't know about you, but we found it great fun. We could provide our own snacks and drinks, sit and lounge around on our sofas, and watch the entertainment from Lizzie and Simon, which was both on the quiz side was great fun, but also just on the personal side was also quite hilarious. So that was a great time, and it raised £479. So thank you very much to Lizzie and Simon, both who are not here today, but we really appreciate that. Usually in the off years we have a music event, and of course this year we decided that wasn't appropriate. Indeed, last year we had to cancel the jazz group that we had arranged. And so Elizabeth, who Bruce mentioned a little bit earlier, offered to come and record some pieces, where she came to Sunrising in the spring and did some performances with the cello and with the viola, and we produced a set of videos for that. That was really well supported, so thank you to those of you who came and had a watch and generously gave some money for that as well. That raised £758. So once again, not an event we could have live, but at least we were able just to keep the ball ticking over. And to some degree, what I meant to say at the beginning is that these events are partly about fundraising, but equally they are about the other two elements, which are about supporting the nature reserve and also about nurturing the sunrising community. So these are all events which, even though they're online, do have a way of at least keeping us in touch with you in different ways. So then, just cautiously dipping our toe in the water this year in June, we arranged a book sale, second-hand book sale, and although it wasn't a hugely warm and sunny day, it was quite well attended and raised £200. The main thing to say about that is a thank you to Emma's mum, Judy, whose books and pots were the mainstay of the donations for that particular sale. So that was a good step back out and beginning to recognise some sort of a normal world there. So this year, normally we would have had a roll of remembrance on site, which is often a very popular event and very well attended. And we felt it was really important to at least keep that going, even though lockdown was still in place, and feeling that it was, again, a safer bet just to do something which is online rather than to hold an event where we couldn't control and manage movement. So this was a film set that we did in the course of a day. You can see the usual suspects there. There's Bruce and Emma and Baloo, who did the readings of the names, and you can see Elizabeth there playing the harp. It wasn't really intended as a fundraiser, but it was very encouraging to see how many people happily dip their hands in their pockets to recognise and appreciate the work that was done there. So £850 were raised, even though, as I say, the main point of that was more about the community of friends at Sunrising. Particular thanks to people who aren't on that photo would be Andy McClellan, so that's Elizabeth's partner, who did the videoing of the speakers and of the harp playing, to Emma for the nature video material that was on there, and also to Simon, who very kindly spent hours and hours editing and putting together the footage after we've taken the video materials there. Finally, this is one that actually came out in the previous year, in July 2020, Slow Sunrising, when we were right in deep lockdown. The thought was to create a video which is literally a very slow walk around with Emma, her picking out bits and pieces of the meadow. And that was very successful when it was first released, but there's just a note here to say it raised another £128 this year, so it remains current, and for people who haven't been able to get across the Sunrising yet, or yet haven't felt willing to venture out or able to venture out, that provided some sort of comfort for them. So we're just beginning to think ahead now. That brings us pretty much up to date. The Roll of Remembrance was our last event, and we're now thinking towards the planting weekend. The main thing to say about this is it's a Friends event to the extent that it's supported by the Friends and Trustees with a refreshment stall, although the planting itself is a company-based activity. But of course it serves very well to involve families with the planting, and to some degree is a way of making sure that we continue to plant only bulbs that are native and appropriate to the nature reserve, rather than spending a lot of time removing the hard work that others have put in, but unfortunately putting in bulbs that actually aren't appropriate or plants that aren't appropriate. So last year we planted about 2,500 bulbs and 460 pots, which I have to say were all cared for and nurtured from seed by Emma last year, and this year will be by Emma and Libby, who we'll hear a little bit more about later. So this year, there you go, there's Bruce at the stall there from last year's fundraising side of that event there. So the planting weekend this year is for Saturday to the 16th to Sunday the 17th of October. Last year we did run this. It was very, very carefully marshalled, and we plan to do exactly the same thing again. So booking is a necessity for that. If you're interested, of course, Emma will be in touch with an email or with a note to let you know the score with that. But that's something that's coming up in the weekend. And on that note, if any of you are keen gardeners or happy to help with the volunteering side of things, even if you're not planning to place bulbs yourself, then there's an opportunity there. It's always very welcome to have a few people who are coming along and able to offer their planting skills, knowing how deep to put a daff, how deep to put a snowdrop and so on. Not to mention, of course, the little plug plants which need just a little bit of care as they're placed into that quite challenging clay soil. So then just moving on to our routine for the end of the year, the Armistice Day, that's usually a very low-key affair. You're always welcome to come along to that. We will announce it closer to the time again. It tends to be quite a local affair, and it's just a small gathering that we have on the 11th itself, unless it's a Sunday, in which case we would be at the Tysoe event. But if it's on a weekday or on a Saturday, then we will always be there at 11 o'clock on the 11th of November. For the Christmas event, remaining cautious in terms of being able to control movement and people coming and going, we've decided that we're just going to not do anything formal for Christmas. We normally would have maybe a carol event or some sort of fair, but we're not going to do that this year. Of course, we will be on hand to provide you with sales of gifts. If there's anything that you want to pick up for Christmas presents, you're always very welcome to do that. Christmas cards, we can do that more informally, but we won't be doing anything formal at the end of this year. But just on that note, a quick thing about Christmas wreaths. We used to do Christmas wreaths. For this year, and in fact last year as well, we haven't done them, but instead referred people who are interested to local florists who know the rules that we apply, in particular about biodegradable materials. So one of the ways that we're aiming to work with this is to reduce as far as possible the amount of rubbish that we have to throw into landfill at the end of the Christmas season. It's always a bit of a downer if you end up having a massive amount of rubbish to throw away. And I have to say the response of families generally has been excellent. You can see there we've got the reuse. So the person on the left there is Jackie, who's the florist across the road here, does some wonderful flowers. She comes out and helps us to take the wreaths apart, many of which she has supplied. And you can see the ones that she's taking away for reuse. Then you've got the bags in the middle for compost. Again, that's absolutely fine. And the tiny bag, I'd say tiny, small, perhaps not tiny. Emma definitely wouldn't call it tiny. She might even call it large, but I would call it a medium-sized bag with the refuse that went to landfill. So again, in terms of just the environmental dimension of looking after the burial ground, that was very successful. Quick note for yourselves and just for friends and family, we have this page up on the website. If any of your friends and family are not sure what they can and can't bring, that's quite a good place to send them to. Or indeed, if you come across anybody else related to sunrising who is looking for advice on that, there's a dedicated page which focuses very much on seeing if we can reduce and make it as compostable, as recyclable as possible. And so then moving into the summer, we're going to take an optimistic view on this coming summer that we'll be able to resume on a fairly regular basis. And so the Alexander Washboard Trio, who sadly we had to cancel 2 years ago, have agreed to come in the summertime this year, and Emma will send out dates for that. Most of the costs for that are covered through sponsorship, which will have come from some of you, no doubt. We have a ring-fenced fund which is for covering costs in events like this. So most of that's going to be covered there, and then of course there'll be the associated fundraising to go with that. How many of you came to the jazz event, which was, must have been about 3 or 4 years ago? Had an absolutely fabulous summer's day where there was jazz in the roundhouse and it was just about as perfect as could be. We'll hope for something very similar. One of the chaps in this Washboard Trio was the chap who led the group that came last time, so he knows his stuff. The Moth Night, sadly, we've had to cancel this 2 years in a row now. We at one point thought we might be able to hold it this August, but once again, caution suggested that we should perhaps be careful given that it's night time and very difficult again to control movement. But we are hoping, and Peter Cranswick from Slimbridge, thank you, Slimbridge Wildfowl Trust, has offered for a third time very happily to come down. He'll be giving a talk and then we'll have a bit of a walk around the burial ground as a nighttime event. So that's set for 22 at the end, August time. And then finally, again for 2 years we've not had nature walks, and indeed our nature surveys have been restricted to staff activity primarily, but we hope that these will resume next year, and if they don't we'll certainly come back to perhaps doing another slow sunrising series with Emma walking around talking a bit about what's new and what's changed there. Good. I'm going to pass across to Bruce now, who's going to talk to you about the project side of things. Thank you.
I'm sure I hardly need to say that projects is primarily the merchandise, the fundraising merchandise, and of course sales of all these items have suffered for the last year or so. Our events, like everybody's, as you heard David say, so many being cancelled and so forth, so the opportunities for sales have been fairly non-existent, but it's not all doom and gloom, I have to say. Jams, jellies and chutneys, made of course by Jonathan Fletcher, who is with us today. These have proven preposterously popular since their introduction back in 2018. A perfect fundraising project, completely self-created and self-driven. John does all the work, he picks all the fruit, he bottles. Do you bottle or is it jarring? What's the term? You jar them. You preserve them, yeah, good. Yeah. With all the profits, of course, going straight to the friends. They never fail to sell out, and as you can see, these have raised an extraordinary 1156, and I know John has bought with him today another 150 jars, so these will be available in the merchandise, so do please take advantage of that. The tea towels, another popular item featuring the stunning painting by Philip Bannister, another idea which became a reality principally through the donation of Phil's time and talent. Sales of this, as you see, has raised 793 since their appearance in 2018. Keyring, a comparatively recent addition to the range, created very much as a companion piece, if you will, to the equally popular lapel badge. This is the first year that we have seen a profit from the sales of this. So from here on, of course, it's all profit with a potentially that much profit, 525. The hair purses, made another of our good friends and supporter, Carol Stripe. These, again, are made by her own fair hand. They come in a range of colours. Each one is unique. I've seen some nice new colours of these, and they have raised, as you see, 488 since they too were introduced in 2018. Perennial calendar. This is one of the newer items. This was an excellent idea of Jane's initially. When it came to fruition, the completed calendar served as a showcase for the stunning work of local photographer Richard Ellis. We're now on to our second print run of these calendars, which gives you an indication of how popular they have proven to be. So this has been a successful addition to the fundraising range. Where are we going exactly? This, our children's book, an introduction very much, I suppose, to the concepts of death and loss, geared very much towards a younger readership. It's a beautifully illustrated book. We are not yet showing a profit from its sales, but that will come, I'm sure. The honey. The bees may have gone. The honey remains. The honey has always been a firm or runny favourite and has always sold consistently well. I'm sure you all know we had to remove the bees from the site as the bees got a little tetchy, but we have a fair few jars left, so no need for panic buying just yet, unless, of course, you want to. Feel free. These are the honey sales, as I used, a staggering 4,500 since we first started offering it back in 2012. Lapel pins, I mentioned these earlier, again a very popular item, designed by our good friend and supporter Tim Howe. We are on to our second production of these pins, so this too is a steady fundraiser, raising, as you see, over £1,000 since 2015. The cards, these two, another very popular item showcasing the skills of Emma. Sales of these have produced a wonderful 4,164 since they first appeared in 2012. This is the current range, yes? What we also now have are the latest, the winter cards. Now, Emma's just assembled these. As you probably know, we tend to print up only as many of these as people order. You will have the opportunity to have a look at a couple of laminated prints of these. If you wish to order, there is a piece of paper, a list in there. All we need is your name, contact details, and the quantity you want. So that would be helpful if you could do that. And we move on to next steps. So it's back over to Emma.
Right. I know we're sliding up off time a little bit, so I'm going to speed up a bit. Thank you. So next steps. First of all, 2 new additions to the team. The youngsters, excuse me, I feel old. The youngsters sitting there, we have Libby on the corner. I was going to put up a photograph, but she doesn't like photographs. Libby, we took on part-time in April 2020 and in full-time in 21 this year. She works primarily as my assistant, but is doing more in terms of plaques, ashes, interments, and the nature reserve. There's a picture here of the butterfly bank, because a lot of the work she's been doing on the butterfly bank is brilliant. It's far more than I could have done. I just don't have the time and energy for that, which is great, weeding it to allow the wild strawberries to really take over. The other person is Lucia, still got the mask on. Lucia came part-time with us in February, and she works more in the back office. She's doing IT, website and accounts, and in time she'll take over the background management of our databasing, which of course is crucial as the administrative infrastructure in any company now, but particularly with our burial registers and things. And you can see this crazy stuff on the screen is actually what she did to make our website accessible for people with sight impairment, so that the descriptives of what you're seeing work properly. Sort of, magic. Thank you. On the nature reserve front, well, who here can tell what kind of a skipper that is? Is it a large skipper, a small skipper, or an Essex skipper? It's actually a large skipper. The trick is that the orange to grey on the underwing is clearly defined, and you can also see a faint checkered pattern, which isn't seen on the other two. The Essex also has blacker tips on the antenna. So would you like to come and try identifying butterflies? Actually, can you just see that, go to the next slide, the little green creature on the next slide? Can you see there's a little green creature on the meadow foxtail? That, I think, is an oak bush cricket nymph. Isn't that cool? Isn't nature wonderful? We have had some wonderful mentions in Butterfly Conservation's local magazine, The Hair Streak, notably on the small tortoiseshell. It's becoming quite rare, but in 2020 the butterfly in Warwickshire returned to numbers not seen since the mid-1990s. 190 were recorded at Borden Hill Nursery and an incredible 264 at Sunrising Natural Burial Ground. Also the meadow brown, we had really good numbers, and the gatekeeper, again, really good numbers, which are recorded there in the hair streak. And those numbers, how do you count butterflies? You do it by not wandering around and counting everyone you've seen, but going on a specific walk where you're walking at a specific pace and you're counting in a specific way. And these pink lines across the map here show you exactly what those walks are. And the important thing about those walks is that they are through habitat which is changing, which shows how the changing numbers of butterflies are indicating the increasing value of the nature reserve. If anyone would like to be involved in butterfly transect walking at Sunrising, get in touch, because we can show you how and you can be a part of that part of the team. The butterfly stones, you can see where that is, the little yellow one. The butterfly stones are what I call my massive rockery. We dug that out, dug out the topsoil, filled it with subsoil, compacted it, so it was really rubbish soil, so that no grass and other plants would grow through, not easily. We covered it in Hornton stone, and then we planted 100 or so little bulbs, most of which died in the heat of 2020. But when the rains did come in July last year, some did recover, and we planted another, Libby and I planted another 3 or 4 dozen last October. And this year we've kept it watered. Some of you may see there's a new water butt down there. We've kept it watered and it's doing okay. We're starting to get there. And you can see particularly the little strawberries need a bit of water, but the creeping cinquefoil and the bird's foot trefoil and hopefully the wild basil will get that going. And we've got some lovely salad bonnet about the edges. The butterflies aren't quite so keen on it yet. That's because it's still in its developing stage, but also because it needs a little bit more shelter around it, which is another part of the development. But lovely place to sit. This is something that Lucia and David have been doing, which is our moth gallery. Isn't that a fabulous picture of those, I can't remember the name of that, hawk moth. A poplar hawk moth, I think. But you can see the gallery here, and every one of those pictures was taken, mostly by Alan Pryor, our moth surveyor, was taken at Sunrising. So lovely. You can see, just think of moths as being little brown beasties that you don't want in your clothes, but they are extraordinary and wonderful indicators of a healthy environment. What Alan says is that moth numbers are going down everywhere and they are rising at Sunrising. So we're doing well. This is a creature that I really adore, and I would love if one of you knows, someone who knows, or you know more about hoverflies, because we want to start really doing something about the hoverflies. This one is called a footballer, Helophilus pendulus on an oxeye daisy. Here you have a marmalade hoverfly, Epiciferus balteatus on a bramble flower. And you've got 3 more. You've got the common banded at the top, the large tiger at the bottom left, and a pied hoverfly. Aren't they wonderful? Again, you think hoverflies, just little beasties, do you know? But they're extraordinary creatures. And anything we can do to see what's there, the better. I've been wanting to do something specific about beetle habitats, creating more piles of rotting wood, really. And Libby took this on as a project and decided between Libby and Lucia, they decided that they would create, or Libby would create, a beetle castle. And you can see that it is a castle. There are over 4,000 species of beetle in Britain, from ladybirds to longhorns, stag beetles and chafers. This is a slow burn project because we're putting up wood which will take a while to rot and a while to encourage the beetles to get there. We'll have a little habitat interpretation board there soon, but this is a lovely thing. This beetle castle is actually near the pond, and there's another one up at the back by the sheds at the top entrance. It's been a very hard few years for barn owls, some of you will know. Climate change is not doing barn owls any good, and that's mostly wind. Barn owls need to hear their prey, and when it's windy, you can't hear the mouse in the grass. So they're struggling. We're doing our best, and we've got a perfect habitat for them, really. But this year we had a lovely little individual who was hunting around Sunrising for a lot of the year. And we've also renewed our nest box. So our barn owl nest box has had a series of sponsors who have changed, helped it, put in the new one and a new one and a new one. And we've just got a new one which should last a lot longer. It's a more expensive box. One of the changes we've had at Sunrising of late is that our dog passes are now all avoided partly because we've seen dog mess on site. We can't be there all the time. What we want is anyone who visits Sunrising, if you see someone with a dog, ask to see their permit. Find your courage, stride up to them and say, please can I see your permit? We have now dog permits with photographs of the dog. And Katie and Roscoe here said that I could use their permit as an example. So beautiful picture, isn't it, of Roscoe? So everyone who has a dog walking at Sunrising is only allowed to go from the car park to a specific grave and back to the car park, and the dog has to be on a lead at all times and can leave nothing behind. And they must be willing to show their permit to anybody who asks for it. So please be a part of our policing of that. That would be lovely. The vision map. I'm going to go ahead and tell you a few changes about what's happening on site. Many of you will see this. This is a bit old. This is what we saw last summer. And this is what's on the interpretation board at the main car park, which is a little bit out of date now. I'll tell you why. This is our QGIS map. In other words, the QGIS sensible software mapping system that we use, which we're able to update all the time. You can see areas of woodland are in green. You can see areas of pink or pale pink are wildflower meadow. And that's what it looks like now. In other words, all of that top bit is not yet woodland. So it's this top little corner which is about to change, or has been in the process of changing. As we start to bury towards the middle and the higher end of the site, we need to start thinking about moving the main entrance to the top entrance. So that tatty large top entrance is going to become the main entrance to Sunrising, which will leave the bottom entrance and the bottom car park just for visitors, which will mean when you have a funeral with 20, 30 cars that fills the car park, that can be at the top and you can still get in and visit even when there's a funeral happening. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We've done that area of new car parking and tracks. It needs to be, it's tatty substone. It needs to be covered with a good layer at the top. That big red arrow shows the position of this photograph. In other words, so we're looking down towards the lane. And that shows you've got parking on the right and grass on the left for people to mill about or park on when it's dry. And then the next bit is the longhouse. We talked about this in the newsletter. I talked about this last year. There's a sign on the gate saying we're in the middle of planning application. The blue box in the middle is where we intend to put our longhouse. The longhouse, and these are the designs. It's probably, hopefully, a reclaimed slate roof with a timber frame, which is oak timber frame, and a larch cladding, and windows that look out over that long view. So all of those windows will look out. Essentially, it's a 3-bay garage. It's not a fancy building. It's not sealed. It's not going to be a building like this. It is a garage. It will be as cold as a garage. In other words, what we wanted to create was something a bit bigger and a bit warmer than the roundhouse, which wasn't a big building that would cost us £200,000 to build. Something that just gives us a bit more shelter. This time next year, hopefully we'll have our AGM in the longhouse. The cabin and toilets. So as we move up to the top, we're going to have another little cabin like the one at the bottom, and also a toilet block. The toilet block will have a composting toilet and composting urinals. So gentlemen who tend to pee on the floor won't have to pee where the ladies are. So yes, a composting toilet and urinals. The urinals will have an earth floor. And that's where those will go. We'll have to take out just 2 or 3, maybe 4 trees to put those into that little area of woodland. The main difference is going to be noticeable in the entrance. That's because although the county and the district, the parish, have all said they're happy with our planning application, They all say, but you need to address the entrance, which means we're going to have to take out quite a few trees, open the entrance and make the splays a lot bigger. So that's going to be quite fierce and quite hard to cope with, but it will soften over time. A lot of the trees we're going to be taking out are ash trees that have dieback. They're still all right, but they will be dead within 5 years. So essentially what we'll be doing is preempting that and taking out ash. Tree sparrows. After a huge amount of work and focus on the tree sparrow population at Sunrising, we now have to report that these shy little birds appear to have been completely competed out by the feisty house sparrows. The larger sparrows were beginning to monopolise the feeders, which is why we stopped putting up the feeders by the main car park. It's a real shame, but there's no point in trying to get them back because everything we're doing for tree sparrows, the house sparrows are monopolising. That's because sparrows came up from the village to the stables as they put in more buildings, and then from the stables next door they've come to us. House sparrows have been on the red list as endangered. There are lots of places in the country where there are no house sparrows, but they are completely dominant in this village. So we're changing our tree sparrow project into a farmland birds project in line with the County Ecology Department's farmland birds habitat biodiversity audit plans. This includes linnets, reed buntings, skylarks, tree sparrows, if we can get them back, yellow wagtails and yellow hammers, which we have a population of all of those except the yellow wagtails, which we've only seen sporadically. And we're going to be really focusing on these and seeing what we can do. Libby has done a wonderful ID guide. We've stolen these photos from the internet, so we can't publish this, but it's for use by us or any volunteers. We've been putting up little feeders and a trail camera to see. You can see a reed bunting there, which has been using the farmland feeder, which has got red millet in it. And we are checking those as well. We've taken away the farmland feeders because the house sparrows found them. But we're also looking more at weeds. Weeds along the car parks, weeds in new graves, weeds in tracks, weeds that are really valuable to these farmland birds, which we've pulled out in order to keep the place looking tidy for you. So I'm going to stop doing that. And in order not to upset people and think that I've left it and made it all look dreadful, I'm going to put up a habitat interpretation board to explain why groundsel is such an important plant, which is the one that's there. So look out for our weed habitat board. What is a weed? A plant that looks as if it's in the wrong place. And we have wasteland weeds, like nettles and thistles, in what we call the ruderal edge. Ruderal comes from the Latin rudus, meaning rubble. But some weeds like stony ground. So we're going to put up the little habitat board to explain why we're no longer weeding the tracks. I'll take out thistles and anything that's a hazard, trip hazard, but not the little ones which are brilliant for the birds. The other thing we're going to be doing is planting trees along the northern boundary. So what we're going to do is create about 8 to 10 metres of hedge on our side with large trees. We're going to allow the blackthorn to get thick and encroach, and then we're going to cut that down in series every 4 or 5 years. So we've got fresh blackthorn coming through, and then we're going to have a great big thick hedge for hedgerow birds to nest in, for meadow birds to hide in, and for feeding. That's the northern boundary with a new chunk taken out. You can see on the right there blackthorn encroaching. You can see what was the path, and then you can see the grass, the old grass mown, and all of that will be trees. We will be looking for tree planting volunteers. I think probably we're going to be looking at about 400 or 500 trees, much of which will be hedge, but some nice big trees in there as well. Monthly views, this is the end of my bit. Monthly views, this is a bit of fun. In order to help families know what to anticipate as the year slides by, the different seasons, I have taken 13 photographs in 13 different places, and I'm just going to show you one. This is looking through Oliver's Wood to Peter's Wood, and the cabin is just behind. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. Isn't it lovely just to see from one place? I've slightly missed it here and there, you know, just the edges, so we're going to see if we can do it more exactly next year. But that's all kinds of fun. And then we'll put up probably 4 in a year in different places on the website for you to see. I'm now going to pass back to David to talk about how you can get involved.
Thank you, Emma. So I suppose different from events, getting involved is opportunities for anybody who has an interest to actively work on the burial ground side of things, which I suppose is meeting that second aim that we've got, which is to support the work of the development of the nature reserve. Now, this, of course, isn't solely focused on the nature reserve. It might be working with events such as this, but a primary focus for this particular section is some of the opportunities that are coming up to work with the nature reserve itself. The third point there, which Bruce already mentioned, is, of course, if anybody here, or if you know of anybody who may have an interest in joining us as a trustee, then they're most welcome to have an informal chat. Just let us know. We're very happy to talk about that. So Planting Day, we've talked about that already, coming up in October 21. That's an opportunity for gardeners, particularly with some planting skills, to help with getting either seeds, bulbs and plants in the ground on behalf of families, or alternatively for the stack of bulbs and plants that we're going to be putting in as just a sunrising contribution to the annual planting. The pond work, those of you who've seen the pond recently will not believe that has been cleared in several years, but it was absolutely, well, I wouldn't say rate clean last November, but it was given a pretty heavy shot. We gave it 2 sessions because the previous year we hadn't done it at all. And what we've discovered is that by capping, there's a pipe that feeds into the pond, which then allows us to control the height that the pond level is at. And that's really the key, is by being able to manage the height means that we can then get in there to clean it up. So having cracked that one, we're confident that we'll be able to, again, have another go this year. So it's in 2 rounds. We've got first the cutting, and a very good batch of volunteers, very enthusiastic given the heavy rain that we had, and the less attractive job of actually just moving all the compost or the material to the compost so that it can just recycle itself. So that will be coming up in November. If you are interested, you're very welcome giving us a shout. I think we probably have the numbers already set because it's quite a small focused event, but if you are interested, do let me know, and there's no reason why I can't put you on that list. This will be a fairly large enterprise. The tree planting, we've got 400 or 500 trees to go in, so that'll be an opportunity for volunteers to become involved there. And of course, if any of you fancy that, do give us a shout, remembering it's going to be quite chilly when we do that. That then takes us to February time-ish, where we're mulching trees. There will be some of you here who will have, I hope, good memories of the mulching work that's done. Again, that's quite, I wouldn't say hard work, but it's quite constant work, but has proved incredibly valuable, particularly with the very dry summers that we've had. I'm quite sure that the mulch that we've put down has saved many of the young trees as they've had to cope with these very hot summers that we've had, hot spells through the summer. And then finally, Nature Survey Days. If you fancy the idea of coming to learn a bit about, you might be an expert already, in which case you're very welcome, but if you fancy coming along to be a little bit more focused, the Survey Days allow us to go and actually enumerate all of the flowers that we can find, all of the flora that we find in particular set areas. So that's something that will come up next summer, all being well, and if you're interested, just look out for Emma's announcements about that. Bruce, I'm going to hand back to you to just close up. Thank you.
Caterers all sliding out. Great. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of the first half. All that remains for me to do is, of course, to thank you all, not just for being here today and for making the effort, but as always for all of your ongoing support, not just through buying merchandise, but through all your time and effort and your belief in what Emma and David have created here. It's your enthusiasm and your support which very much sustains us, and we literally, so much of this we could not do without your input, so thank you for that. If you've enjoyed today, if you feel you can tolerate another one next year, as you can see, the date is now slated for the 3rd of September next year, so, and it might be in the Longhouse. That's a bold claim, so we might be in the Longhouse, so do wrap up.